Good evening. The council meeting of July 17th will come to order. I would ask that all in attendance either turn off or silence your electronic devices, and if you would please stand to honor God and country. God of justice and mercy, thank you for the gift of life and for the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. Help us to see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us, and to treat all persons with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, Father, renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build our community. We lift these petitions, confident of your goodness and love. Amen. Amen. We will now pledge the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We open this evening with a recognition. Would ask Mr. Joe Hammondtree and Margaret Hammondtree to come forward. And would also ask Nikki Bradshaw, president of the Rotary Club North, and Paul Casebolt, director of admissions for Florida College, to come forward. Mr. Hammondtree, it is an honor to honor your father this evening as we spoke ahead of the opening of today's meeting. Your father truly did exemplify what servant leadership is all about. Our city is as rich as it is, in large part to the time, the talents, and the treasures he shared with our community. So it truly is an honor to present to you this proclamation, which reads, a resolution of appreciation for William Carl Bill Hammondtree. Whereas the city of Temple Terrace has lost a valued member of the community with the passing of William Carl Bill Hammondtree on May 27, 2018, at the age of 92, and whereas Bill was known for many of his strong, forward-thinking leadership and for being a generous and knowledgeable mentor, and whereas Bill began his community service with 66 years of perfect attendance at the Tampa North Rotary Club, he served in a multitude of roles for Rotary, including club president and district governor. And whereas Bill was part of the original Temple Terrace Volunteer Fire Department and served for a time as its chief, he also served on the Temple Terrace City Council for 22 years, from 1978 to 2000, and is one of the longest-serving council members in Temple Terrace history. And whereas, after working in a variety of roles for Florida College to include business manager and director of industries, he left college employment in 1973, but he and his wife, Doris Jean, continued to work tirelessly in support of Florida College and Florida College Academy. He served on the board of directors for 37 years, and in that role gave untold amounts of time and resources to furthering the college's mission. Whereas Bill's true legacy lies in the profound effect he had on the generation of students he influenced. His contributions as an intelligent, thoughtful, hardworking, kind, dedicated, and generous person are unparalleled and have enriched those fortunate enough to have known him. And whereas, as a faithful member of the Church of Christ, Bill was a radiant reflection of God's love in all aspects of his life, now, therefore, be it resolved by the mayor and the city council of the city of Temple Terrace, Florida, that on behalf of its members, city employees, and the community, the city hereby recognizes with great admiration and appreciation the contributions of Bill Hammondtree over the course of his distinguished career and throughout his life.
Recognition, very much appreciated by me and by the family that were not able to be here tonight. Thank you very much for friends and fellow workers at the college and through the Rotary Club to come out and to show support for Dad and all he's tried to do in his life. He loved working for the city. He greatly enjoyed his 22 years here on the city council. It was one of the privileges that he felt like he had, and he really appreciated the confidence that the citizens placed in him, voting him to that role. And he worked hard to make the city a better place, and hopefully he left an imprint for good in the city. But he would have loved being here tonight, and I'm sure he's very appreciative of this as the family is, and we very much want to thank you for taking time out to recognize us.
Thank you very much. Next, a recognition of Republic Bank. If Mr. James Kirkpatrick, Senior Vice President and Market Manager of Hillsborough West Shore Office of Republic Bank, would come forward. And also, I would invite up members of our Mayor's Youth Leadership Council in attendance to join them, Mr. Sam Estes, Mr. Ethan Fleming, Mr. Karsten McClard, and Mr. Dean Cooper. If you would all come forward and go to the dais. Mr. Kirkpatrick, thank you for your commitment and partnership with the City of Temple Terrace. This evening, we wanted to publicly thank you for your investment in future leaders. For the citizens who are viewing tonight, for those who are in attendance this evening, the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council has chosen 13 young people in our community, and I will just say 13 awesome students in our community who have already shown themselves to be great leaders. And as we embark on this, we have champions of business who are stepping forward to work with our young people. So this evening, we wanted to thank Mr. Kirkpatrick and present a certificate of appreciation which reads, presented to Republic Bank in recognition of being a bronze level sponsor for the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, awarded this 17th day of July 2018. And we want to thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick, for being here, and we have Mayor's Youth Leadership Council members here as well. Oh, and we got a big check.
Wow.
Whoa!
I don't know that it works, but.
Where do you want us, Lauren?
If I could, I was here a few months back when they were introduced at one of the council meetings, and the mayor talked about their accomplishments. It was incredible to listen to their activities, their academic accomplishments, their leadership, and truly a great group of students. And at Republic Bank, we're happy to be a part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, council members. Continuing, if Mr. Pedro Parra will come forward. Mr. Parra is the Principal Planner, Strategic Planning Initiatives for the Hillsborough County Planning Commission, and is here this evening to present the East Fowler Avenue Land Use Study. Good evening, Pedro.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for allowing me to come. This is a non-actionable item. It is information only. We have been working on this particular item for about a year, and I'll explain to you why we've been working on it a year. It usually wouldn't take us that long. If we can start the presentation. This is a study of the land use along East Fowler Avenue. It was prompted by a discussion with the Tampa Innovation District. What they wanted to have accomplished was to look at the existing land uses along Fowler Avenue, to do an analysis of what the existing conditions were in terms of the existing zoning, the existing future land use, and to look at the build-out of these particular kinds of categories. For example, under the existing zoning, how much residential was still left in the zoning categories to be developed. In the future land use, how much of the floor area ratio or residential was still unbuilt along the corridor. They wanted us to look at how old the structures were. They wanted to look at the land to structure value ratio. In doing that, we looked at a lot of the things, so I'll start there. This is going to be a process about a discussion with all three jurisdictions that abut the East Fowler Avenue of what potentials there are or options there are for Fowler Avenue related to each of the jurisdictions' future land use categories. That's one of the things we'd like to get out of it is we'd like to discuss whether there are changes that we can bring forward in the update of the various comprehensive plans to reflect the desires of the jurisdictions. To do that in the framework of the vision 2045 vision timeline of the comprehensive plans. So if we can go to the next slide. Again, we want to be clear that we have not come up with any recommendations. We are not trying to put forward anything. We want to have a discussion of recommendations from each of the jurisdictions. So we're going to include the City of Tampa, City of Temple Terrace, unincorporated Hillsborough County, and the people that we're going to include are staff. And the invitation will be to staff and to elected, appointed body representatives. The future land use, what we're looking at in terms of what those long-range plans are for future development are primarily from 275 to 56th Street. We're looking at opportunities for mixed-use design and development. We're looking at the densities, whether they're appropriate densities. Again, we're not just looking today, we're looking long range. And we're looking at how these might support both the Innovation District and the jurisdictional objectives. There is a opportunity here to get all jurisdictions in the same place and to discuss an opportunity for an overlay district. This is a unique area because it is an area, especially abutting Fowler Avenue, where there is an overlap of jurisdictions. We don't find that in other places in the county. So we are looking from 275 to the bypass canal just east of 75, and we are looking at all of those parcels that abut Fowler Avenue. We have done a data analysis up to 300 feet adjacent to the roadway, or any parcel that falls within that distance that abuts a property up to 300 feet. And as I said, this is an area that has a lot of overlap of different kinds of bodies, agencies, jurisdictions. So you can see from the PowerPoint graphic that we have Hillsborough County, we have Tampa, we have Temple Terrace, but in terms of the Innovation District, the Tampa IP, we have both their larger boundary area and we have a core area that is adjacent to Fowler Avenue. So we are trying to look not just at, specifically at the adjacent parcels, but we want to talk about the different planning activities. We want to talk about the different entities that exist out here, and we want to identify the major players and bring them into a discussion as we unroll this as well. So the data that we've been working on, we looked at a quarter-mile or half-mile buffer along Fowler Avenue to look at the opportunities for transit. We call it a transportation buffer. Again, the properties abutting within 300 feet, future land use zoning, existing land use the property appraiser information, and that's how we got to some of the information we looked at in terms of build out. But we also pulled in a large amount of information. It's in a background document that once we finish here tonight, our objective is to move forward and to send that report out, that background report, both to staff and to the appointed officials that we've got on our public participation list, to give them a chance to start looking at the data and giving us comments about whether we've missed something or have any questions about how we came to look at the information we're looking at. I just wanted to show you a few slides, again, using the property appraiser's record and the folios. in this area, we looked at all of the planned developments that were split by jurisdiction, and we tried to then apply that to zoning and land use. And what we have done is for example, in this one, we looked at the percentage of existing build-up based on the future land use that exists today under the future land use categories. And again, this is a large picture, but we can get down, we can look at parcel by parcel. So when we come together as a group and we start discussing it, we have a spreadsheet that we can actually identify any parcel on here and look at that information in a focused way. We also looked at the remaining potential residential build-out based on the flu category. So we can look at it from both sides, what's actually on the ground and what remains unbuilt. And when we combine that with the land to existing structural value, I think that gives us a great idea of what the potential is for redevelopment. This is something that we really haven't done before, but in this study, we're bringing it forward, and we want to start rolling it into other studies that we do. And in this one, we're looking at the existing floor area ratio that's developed under the future land use. I know you're probably looking at that large blue area. It stands out. It's because it's all one contiguous folio that's still adjacent to Fowler Avenue. But again, we have done some work to cut away those pieces that are not pertinent to the study that we're looking at. And then the last one that I presented up there is to you is the remaining potential floor area ratio, development potential along the corridor. So we've got the existing that's built out, the floor area ratio that's built out, and we also are showing that it's unbuilt, the potential for the FAR still to be developed along the corridor. So what we're hoping to do is we're hoping to use this data in a real way by providing the data from each jurisdiction. We've compiled like an example of all of the zoning that's in place and their definitions and what they can do under that zoning category. We've done the same thing for the flu, so that what we're hoping to do is in this discussion be able to allow all jurisdictions to have an active conversation about what the current state of this corridor is from each perspective, and to be able to question each other about how those might affect one another in terms of the long-range vision for this corridor. So there are other studies that are going on in this area. Well, that's the reason we have been held up in terms of carrying out this study. When we began, we thought it would be about a 6-month process, but then there was a university redevelopment area market analysis that was contracted through a consultant for, and so we didn't want to go forward without that market study being something that we could measure against in our discussion. And so that was completed at the end of last month. I don't know if you have looked at it, but if anybody wants to look at it, I can provide a link to it, and you can take a look at what that market study is. There's also a university area multimodal feasibility study that I believe Clarence Ng, the consultant for FDOT, came and presented to you. He started his analysis a few months after we did, but when he came to you, you had requested that he include from 56 to I-75, so now the entire corridor is being looked at. And in the process, we talked to FDOT about looking at their own process of what the development potential might be. So we've also brought that in. And then there's a wider study here going on, which is the University Area Intermodal Center study. That one's going to complete in 2019, so we'll take what we can, glean from what we can from it, but that's also a study that's pertinent to looking at the Fowler Avenue corridor. So our timeline. Again, we are finishing the existing conditions and research. We're going to start sharing that with staff and with appointed officials. For the local jurisdictions, we are in the process of meeting with the Tampa Innovation Place Executive Board to have a conversation with them about what it is they see as the potential for future development in light of the market study that's come out, and because that market study identified where the potential industrial redevelopment would take place, and it also talks about the mall being the primary place where most of the retail will take place. So with that in mind, we want to talk about what other kinds of potentials there are along Fowler Avenue. I just want to say that discussion is not by any way driven by having a uniform application along Fowler Avenue. It could be that we decide to look only at one portion or two portions or divide it out into 3 different characteristics based on the kind of development potential that might be there and bring those forward, but none of it will come from the Planning Commission as a mandate. It's going to come out of a discussion of what the local jurisdictions think is appropriate for them. It'll come forward as a report, and then it will be brought back to each of the jurisdictions to make their own decisions around. So we're doing the Temple Terrace briefing tonight, but we're, in August, we're calling that meeting together of the local jurisdictional staff and appointed officials. We'll send out the invitation. We'll look at a schedule that meets everybody's timelines and resources. We want to complete that and then kind of digest it. And then when we've digested that, we want to work with the local jurisdictions and representatives to come up with a list of property owners to also call in to review, and then we'll send out a notice to every property owner along Fowler Avenue as an invitation, but just specifically to look at a targeted set of property owners who the local jurisdictions think need to be in this conversation. So our draft and findings are our initial draft October, final draft November, and our final report will be in December. Following this, then, if there are any plan amendments that come out of it, they will follow probably in January or February or thereafter. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them or provide and take back any notes that you think I need to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Para.
Thank you.
Councilman Shalura.
Thank you, Mr. Para. I certainly appreciate your presentation. I do have a couple of questions for you. Obviously, Fowler Avenue is one of the most intense and main arteries that run right through the middle of our city. Does the Planning Commission at all, through their future land use review, take in consideration the type of roadways that would be allowed or planned through this corridor? We've heard dedicated lanes, we've heard express lanes, we've heard a lot of different proposals, conceptual plans that can affect us very good or very bad. So I need to hear from you what at least the Planning Commission's viewpoint is or position on these type of discussions that have trickled in here from time to time.
In this case, there is a multimodal corridor study going on that is a consultant project. Clarence Ng is going to be the manager of that. He is the manager. He is going to talk about the transportation and the transportation and the improvements and the kind of roadways that can happen along Fowler Avenue. We're going to look at the land use, and that's why we waited until he got to a point where we could do this simultaneously. But his job is going to be to look at what the potential kind of roadway improvements or changes along Fowler Avenue would be. We would be plugging in with the land uses and the discussion about what the intentions are in terms of options for the future. And with that, then there'd be an overlap of the two, but I believe it would be more in that study where those recommendations about roadway treatments would happen.
Okay, because that can certainly have a very large impact on the corridor in particular. It seems like the meeting place, shall we say, is going to be around the mall area. And what we don't want it to be is a vacuum where folks are coming off the interstate, Fowler Avenue, and the place of destination is going to be 30th and Fowler, and Temple Terrace sort of gets left behind. We've had some brief discussions, painful discussions in the past, and thanks to our mayor that was able to shed some light on some of these discussions that we were not even aware of. We are very concerned. We certainly want to participate and cooperate. I served with the Planning Commission for 4 years, and you all have done a great job and very transparent, and I certainly appreciate that. But this is extremely important to our city, and it's a lifeline. If Fowler Avenue is handled in a way that some of the traffic is sort of cut off from entering the businesses or the residential community, that may not be a good thing for Temple Terrace. So I just, ask that you please take this back to your planners and express those concerns that we certainly want to be part of the plan and don't want to have to jeopardize any of the opportunities that may be presented to us, because Fowler Avenue is a gateway. It's a gateway to Temple Terrace, a gateway to USF, the mall, all the above. Because I'm certain that dedicated lanes or express lanes or whatever they're going to be called, hopefully there won't be any, but if there are, when it gets to 30th and Fowler, they're going to be wide open where they can access what they want. And we want to make sure we have that same opportunity and benefit coming through Temple Terrace. That's just very important for the one of the most thriving roads in our city. We don't have many of them, major roads, and that's one of the main thriving roads. And we'd like to make sure that we're not forgotten. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Pagorlik.
Thank you. Kind of along those same lines, I had heard today, in fact, that the Bright Line project is rearing its ugly head again. If you're not familiar with that, Bright Line is is one of the names they gave the high-speed line that was squashed by Governor Scott some years ago from Orlando to Tampa, or Tampa to Orlando, however you want to look at it. I had heard today that particular project is gearing back up, and one of the corridors that they're looking at is Fowler Avenue to University of South Florida with high-speed rail. You can imagine that not entirely happy about that, depending on what they do with it. I just wondered what you had heard or know about that particular project, if anything.
I have not heard anything about it. Again, I do want to let you know that we're doing the land use side of it, but we were told from the beginning that here's an opportunity for transportation to do a project that's in line with our discussion. They should not happen separately. The opportunity is for them to happen together. So that's what we are proceeding to do. We've held up this project until we get to that point where we can both come in and have the same conversation. We shared the same background data. The Planning Commission actually came forward and gathered the data, and then we shared it with the consultants. So we're looking at the same data. We're sharing each other's background data to make sure we're looking at the same data. But they are, in effect, although they overlap one another, they are kind of separate discussions about what the recommendations for roadways would be and what our discussion about what the land use. But they are definitely related, and we're hoping that overlap, you're going to have an opportunity in two places, the land use side and the transportation side, as these projects come back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Para.
Thank you.
Next, there is one vacancy on the Hillsborough County Mechanical Board of Adjustments, Appeals and Examiners. The city received one application from Brian Willett. I don't know if Brian is with us this evening. I would ask for a motion to approve the appointment of Brian Willett to the Hillsborough County Board of Adjustment, Appeals and Examiners for a term extending from July 17, 2018 until July 17, 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the nay sign. Thank you, motion carries. Next, council, if the minutes of the July 3rd, 2018 City Council meeting are acceptable, would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion around the minutes? All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you. The minutes stand approved. Next, persons wishing to be heard on items not listed on the agenda or items on the consent agenda, a 3-minute time limit will be imposed on all comments from the public. Individual members of the public who are present in the audience may designate in writing a representative to speak on their behalf, not extending beyond a 10-minute period. As speakers come to the podium, please state your name and your city of residence. During the public comment on items not on the agenda, the city manager and directors who are present in the audience do make note of the items that the public brings up. During the city manager's report, he may comment on these items, or where further research is necessary, he will reach back to our citizens. It is important for the council and the mayor to let all citizens know that your comments are taken seriously and are followed up on. This evening, would call forward Don Statz.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Mr. Ritter as well as Ms. Rennie have given me their time, so if you want to add that to it in the event that I need it. I want to speak a little bit tonight about the liens that the city has filed and not collected. With my construction background and knowledge of the lien process, I could not understand why the city had not been pursuing these liens. As of May 10th, 2018, the city has $3,327,060 in filed liens for various code and noncompliance issues. These liens continue to accrue on a daily basis. Some of these liens date back to 2005, 13 years ago. As of July 13th, 2018, there are 22 accruing liens for a total of $1,637,099. Currently, there are 132 utility liens in the amount of $78,124.75. Many of these liens, especially the non-homestead properties, are collectible. If you remember, recently we had a property on Mission Hills that became a problem, an eyesore for the neighbors for 2 years. That was a non-homestead property. We could have used the proper lien laws that are available to us today and actually started foreclosure proceedings 90 days after we filed the initial lien. We had it in the city and people working on it for 2 years before it got resolved. So the neighbors sat with an ugly half-built house for 2 years that we could have had foreclosure proceedings started in 90 days. And in that particular case, we probably would have had a solution to the problem shortly thereafter. The city spent thousands and thousands of dollars on that particular case in man-hours, equipment that we did not have to spend. I researched what Hillsborough County and the City of St. Petersburg did. They have retained the service of attorney Matthew Wiedner. Mr. Wiedner has an extensive background in collecting liens, has an excellent record in actually getting the money for those liens. I recently spoke to him, and he will work to collect the liens on a contingency basis as he does with Hillsborough County and the City of St. Petersburg. There will be no cost to the city unless he collects the lien. This process can be used with abandoned, vacant, or blighted properties. So some of these properties that we have that are just sitting there, collecting liens, non-homestead, there's no reason in the world why we can't take that lien property and start a foreclosure proceeding on it. And in some cases, with the non-homestead properties, of course, there's two categories, homestead and non-homestead. Non-homestead is an investor-owned property. A homestead property is where the actual resident lives there. The non-homestead properties are much easier to lien and collect because they aren't, the homestead properties have a lot of exceptions to what you can and cannot do when somebody lives there. Non-homestead, it's there, go after it, and you can get it. In some cases, the city may actually jump the bank and the IRS to collect a lien. And an example of that is if there's a $50,000 lien and the IRS has $500,000 and the bank has $300,000. They have very little interest in fighting for that money because they're not going to get it. So they're not going to chase good money after bad. So in some of those cases, the city will leapfrog them and actually be able to enforce the lien immediately, and they won't contest it. So with that in mind, I would ask that the city manager and his staff contact Mr. Wiedner and discuss with him the possibilities of going after these liens. Now, we can do it in-house, but it's going to cost us a lot of time, money, and effort, because you have to have filing fees, you have to spend a couple $1,000s on some of these. He absorbs all of that. If he doesn't collect it, we don't pay it. We're our staff, we got to pay for title searches, $87. Got to pay filing fees, et cetera, et cetera. So I would ask that Mr. Stevenson take a look at contacting Mr. Wiedmer. I have a lot of the information, so I'd be happy to give it to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Stats. Next, Lee Bell, our CEO of the Temple Terrace Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Bell.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, City Manager. It's with my pleasure to announce a couple things that are going to be coming up in the month of August. First of all, it will be our 53rd year for nominations for Citizen of the Year for Temple Terrace. And we are accepting nominations until August 3rd. So please, if you know a resident of Temple Terrace who is worthy of being Citizen of the Year, please make sure you provide that information in the nomination forms to the city, to the chamber. We will be presenting the award on August 16th at our 55th annual dinner and award ceremony. That will be at the Temple Terrace Golf and Country Club. Also, we are in the process of accepting nominations for the 29th Annual Business of the Year Awards. This is open to any business that has been open for at least 3 years, and it is open to any business in the greater Temple Terrace area. Nominations can be accepted until August 24th, and we will be having an awards ceremony the evening of November 8th, and that will be at the USF Alumni Center like we did last year. And lastly, I would like to especially thank the city staff, and everyone that works so diligently on the 4th of July. We had some unfortunate incidents with the fireworks, but the garden party went on. The band played until well after 9 o'clock. Everybody had a great time. We had a wonderful parade. We had almost 70 entrants in the parade this year, which was a record. So it was a great event. And again, thank you to the city. The workers did a fantastic job, as always, and a pleasure to work with them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Next, a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance proposing city charter revisions. The public hearing is now opened. City Attorney Shoshone will give a brief review.
Thank you. As you know, at the last meeting of council, we had first reading of the ordinance with regard to the ballot questions that will appear for November 6th of 2018, so that certain amendments can be made to the city charter. The ordinance does contain an exhibit which lists the sample questions that will be put to the voters. There is a title and a summary of each one. Also, it includes the actual section of the charter that will change and is shown as a red line version so that it can easily be seen what the current charter reads and what the changes are will be made if the voters vote yes to approve these. So we are asking that council consider these and take a vote on this.
Thank you. I'd ask if there are members of the public wishing to address council on this item. I would ask our communications person, is there any, we are live on Facebook this evening and inviting citizens and our community members to also participate and share comments via Facebook. And I'm getting a sign that there are no questions or comments from the public from that vehicle as well. So at this point, we will close the public hearing, and I would ask council, are there any questions? Councilman Donahue.
Yes. After reading the minutes of the July 3rd meeting, specifically the comments of Mr. Ross, and I quote, "He is not in favor of what council is doing here that allows a voting mayor to term out and run for a council seat and term out and run for a mayor seat. A person remains a voting member on council indefinitely, which defeats the whole purpose of the term limits in the current charter," end quote. So I would like to make a new motion to amend question number 2. And I sincerely move that council remove the words "their same" from the second question, thus reading, quote, "Mayor and council members, upon serving 2 consecutive terms, not be permitted to hold office again for 2 years," end quote. So this will make certain of both Mr. Ross and myself that this word creates ambiguity, that word "this same," and it could be misconstrued to take away term limits. So that is my motion.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Madam Mayor, I have a clarification for Robert's Rules of Order. If I'm not mistaken, if you are on the descending vote, you're not able to bring the question up for a revote, so I just want to make sure that we're on this right track for that. You may know better than I do. I don't have the book in front of me, but I want to make sure we just follow with the procedures.
My apologies, Councilman Chalura, you are correct. If you have been on the losing side of the vote, you are not to bring that up again and file a motion. So if there,
May I make a comment? I looked it up in Rules of Order, and accordingly, this is a new motion. My last motion was long and involved many different words, a whole different array. This is a different motion. The last one specifically cleared up what the consequences would be. This one changes it entirely, so it is a new motion. I wanted to make sure I understand the rule of order, and I did reach out to some experts on Robert's Rules, as well as did my own research. So I will, of course, defer to you, Madam Mayor, if you disagree, but because it is a completely different motion, it is not the same. That's why I'm bringing it forward tonight.
I would ask council if this is a, well, actually, I'm going to turn to our city attorney on this. If Pam, if you would like to weigh in on this area. My study of Robert's Rules would say that on the losing side, you do not bring back up a motion to again squelch what you attempted to kill in the last session.
I think that what Councilwoman Donahue was talking about last time was changing the wording of the particular question. And this time, yes, it is, but it also seems to not just be changing words around. My understanding of what has just been moved is that the charter itself, the amendment of the charter itself be different. So, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm understanding that this is not just a changing of wording in the question, but because the wording of the question does allow for a continuing on of service, that you can move from mayor to councilperson, councilperson to mayor. There really is no sitting out for 2 years. My understanding now of what's being proposed is that there be an absolute term limit, and you can hold no office for 2 years. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, and that's the way the charter stands now.
Okay.
Thank you. And I believe, being respectful of those who served on the Charter Review Committee, the question has been raised by Councilman Shalura. I would ask the council, the consideration of the question and the motion has been objected to. Shall the question and the motion be considered? Those in favor, I would ask you to signify with aye.
In favor of what?
The motion that Councilman Donahue has brought up, the
Okay, I have-
sub-motion.
Before we vote, if I may, unless I'm mistaken, this is the exact same discussion we had
No.
at the last meeting. It is, because Andy, I have the floor, please.
It's okay.
Andy mentioned that he wasn't in favor of this because of the reasons you just stated. And he ultimately said that, you know, it's gonna be a referendum that people will decide. That's what he said. And then you chimed in, so we can change the words, we can change the words. So, yeah, you've milled it down to changing a couple words instead of a lot of words, but this, you have the same intent as you had last time. So I don't see where there's any difference, other than she's found a way to change less words.
May I
So again, the
answer?
consideration of the question has been objected to. Shall the question be considered? Those in favor signify with aye.
Are we considering?
The
whether
motion that Ms. Donahue has brought up, shall the motion be considered? Those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
As we have a 2-2 vote, the mayor does have a vote this evening. I will vote nay. If the city clerk would please read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, calling for a referendum ballot question to be held on November 6, 2018, for the purpose of various amendments to the charter of the City of Temple Terrace, providing direction to the city clerk to coordinate the referendum election as required by Florida law, providing that the charter shall be amended to incorporate any proposed amendment receiving a majority vote of the electors of the city in favor of such amendment, providing for conflict, severability, and an effective date for the ordinance and the proposed charter amendments.
Council would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 1459 proposing city charter revisions. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay
Nay.
sign?
Nay.
And aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance approving the vacation of a certain right-of-way replat of Temple Terrace downtown. The public hearing is now open. City Manager Stevenson will give a brief review.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the second and final reading of a ordinance to vacate a certain right-of-way in the replat of downtown Temple Terrace. Since the contract executed in January of 18 with Paragon Development, in the inspection period, we had discovered that the plat that was done back in July of 17 had somewhat of an error in it, an unexplained cutout, if you would, from the intended property that we were supposed to be conveying to Paragon. This strip of land really incorporates Lot 9 to 18, and for some unexplained reason, there was a 14-foot strip, 14 by 260 feet, that was cut out of the plat, and we don't know why. We are trying to vacate this so that we can, in fact, convey the intended property to Paragon. With that said, I don't know that I have any other information to provide. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, but this certainly would allow us to continue getting to a point of getting this project underway. I know that this certainly is one of those things that, again, it's unexplained. We have no indication why we would want this piece of property for the city's benefit. It serves us no purpose. So, with that, staff recommends approving this vacation.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Are there members of the public wishing to address council on this item? We're all looking at Mr. Moon, who's here this evening.
You mean the man with the smile on his face? Yeah.
At this point, we will close the public hearing. Council questions. Would ask City Clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, vacating, closing, discontinuing, and abandoning a certain right-of-way in the southeast quadrant of the intersection of Bullard Parkway and Bush Boulevard and North 56th Street, City of Temple Terrace, Florida, the same being more fully described in Section 2 hereof, providing for conditions of vacation, providing for recordation, providing a severability clause, providing for repeal of all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Council would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 1458, approving the vacation of a certain right-of-way, replat of Temple Terrace downtown. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you. Motion carries. Continuing on, first reading of an ordinance to amend the code to enact a new section creating the Office of City Attorney. City Manager Stevenson will explain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, with the hiring of our inside attorney in November 2017, there was a need to officially create an office in our Code of Ordinances that didn't exist before. As you're aware, we had historically been using outside legal representation and services from an outside firm. The specific offices of the city manager, the clerk, are listed in the City Code of Ordinances in Chapter 2, Article 3, Division 2, and includes responsibilities, powers, and duties. Since council has hired an in-house city attorney, it's now necessary to amend that section of the code in order to enact a new section creating the Office of City Attorney. The attorney's powers are listed on the attachment to the agenda. Staff recommends that we move forward with this. This will require two readings. A second reading. We will have to bring this back because of the creation of a new ordinance. That will appear on the next agenda if council so wishes for us to move forward with this.
Thank you, City Manager Stevenson. Are there members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, council, any questions? Very good. If acceptable, would entertain a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading. If approved, the ordinance will appear for a second reading and public hearing on August 7th. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify with aye.
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 Oh, I apologize. I have misspoken. If the clerk would please read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, amending Chapter 2, Temple Terrace Code of Ordinances by enacting a new Section 2-A3 in Chapter 2, Article 3, Division 2, specific offices entitled City Attorney, and providing for the repeal of ordinances of parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, and to be clean, I will once again ask for the motion. Councilman Pagorlik.
Move to approve.
And second, all in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you, motion carries. Next, item 6E, a resolution authorizing the use of piggyback agreement for roadway resurfacing. Public Works Director Troy Tinch will explain.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. I'm here again in front of you to present another infrastructure improvement project in the form of roadway resurfacing. As you're all aware, we annually budget for the resurfacing of roadways within the city. And this year, we were fortunate enough to receive a CDBG grant, or a Community Development Block Grant, in addition to the funding that we had available to kind of bolster or augment the resurfacing program. So we have three different forms of resurfacing we're looking to undertake this fiscal cycle. The first is which is milling and resurfacing, very traditional form of roadway resurfacing. You mill about 1.5 inches of the existing roadway surface. You replace it with 1.5 inches of new roadway surface. Provides a very nice finished product, very commonplace. We've used it within the city numerous times. The second type is a little more cost effective. It is a double micro resurfacing. It just puts down about 1/2 inch of a polymer asphaltic base material. This material then smooths out the existing roadway, provides a smooth driving surface. Again, we've utilized this actually in the northern part of the city. The product was very nice. We were very pleased with it, and it's shown quite good wear. So we feel like there are certain areas within the city that this would be paramount to use it within. There's an aerial that I provided in both your packet, and we can show on the television to show that location of where we're looking to put the double micro, where we're looking to resurface. And lastly, a little bit of a more aggressive type of resurfacing. It's full depth reclamation. That's where we actually take the upper 8 inches of asphalt and road base. We grind that all up. We mix it with a cementitious material, water, put it back down. It provides a very solid base for a new roadway surface, which would then be overlaid on top of that. We use these in areas where we have some significant base failure. So all these different roadway surface options, they require different types of structure. So the double micro would be utilized in areas where you have some minor blemishes, some small potholes, some small depressions in the roadway. The mill and resurfaces would be used in areas where you have some more significant roadway surface wear, you have some delamination, and then of course the full depth reclamation would be used in areas that is, again, much more aggressive, where you have significant base failure. Cost-wise, you're looking at double micro is by far the cheapest. Then you would move to the mill and resurface, about $125,000 a mile, $150,000, and then a double micros, about double that. But all those compared to reconstruction of a roadway, which would be double to even triple that cost, you can see that we have tried to utilize those dollars in the most economically and feasible manner. So all said, we're looking at about 3/4 of a mile of mill and resurface, a little over half a mile of double micro, and about 2 1/4 miles with the full depth reclamation, the FDR, for a total of 3.5 miles of new surface within the city. That said, staff recommends City Council approve this resolution authorizing the use of a piggyback agreement between Polk County and Asphalt Paving Systems for roadway resurfacing efforts within the city of Temple Terrace at an amount not to exceed $586,022.50 appropriated under account code 130-1724-541.63-11. I will stand for questions.
I would ask if there are any members of the public wishing to comment on this item. Council, questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tinch. If acceptable, would entertain a motion authorizing the use of piggyback agreement between Polk County and Asphalt Paving Systems for roadway resurfacing efforts within the city of Temple Terrace in the amount not to exceed $586,000 and $586,022.50. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Tinch.
Thank you.
Next, a resolution approving the 2018 Law Enforcement Mutual Aid Agreement with Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Police Chief Ken Albano will explain. Chief?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. Ken Albano, your police chief. Before you tonight for your review and consideration is a renewal of a mutual aid agreement with Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office that has in fact expired. The mutual aid agreements allow us, especially going outside of our jurisdiction, it establishes the framework for which we go outside the jurisdiction, provide emergency and non-emergency assistance to the Sheriff's Office. By virtue of their office, they can, without this, come into Hillsborough County, but it really defines for the officers what is expected from both commands. It's very important. It's been existing for many years, and it is staff's recommendation that council approve this.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, council questions?
No, thank you.
If acceptable, would entertain a motion approving the 2018 Law Enforcement Mutual Aid Agreement with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, council? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Next, a resolution approving the execution of the purchase and sale agreement with Richmond Group of Florida. The city attorney, Shoshone, will explain.
a contract between the City of Temple Terrace and Richmond Group of Florida, which made a presentation to council previously with regard to developing the piece of property that is, make sure it's the right one here, that is set forth in the ordinance to develop 200 apartment building, 200-unit apartment building, has been more or less agreed to between the parties. We've reached an agreement as to the terms here, so that has been presented to you tonight. And if city manager would like to talk about the project a little more, this is connected with that project that, or the apartments that some of you or maybe all of you had visited in Tampa earlier. We're hoping to go ahead and make this sale happen so that some development of that area can take place. If you have any questions about the specific contract, I'll be happy to try to answer them for you.
Are there members of the public? Are there members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Mr. Stats.
Good evening once again. My name is Don Statz. I reside at 132 North Greenfield Avenue here in Temple Terrace. I was a little bit surprised to see that this item was put on the agenda tonight. If you so choose to vote on this tonight, I think it'll be the first time ever that council has voted on a project this size without a town hall. I personally did not know this was going to be on here. I looked at the agreement while I'm sitting here, and I just can't imagine where the city can enter into this agreement without getting the input from the citizens. In the past, this parcel's had a number of projects that wanted to go there as apartments, and there was a tremendous amount of opposition. Now, I'm not opposing the project. I just think that we need to hear from the citizens, and we need to find out what the developer truly intends to do. And if you enter into this agreement tonight, it's pretty much, you're going to do it. I don't think you'll have an opportunity to have the town hall and have people have their input. It's already a done deal. So I would ask council to reconsider this project tonight and have a town hall, let the citizens speak, and see if they're in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stats. Are there any other members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, council questions, comments? Councilman Donahue.
I'm looking at the city manager. I do believe we had a town hall meeting when the Richmond Group presented their proposal, their original proposal, and then now they came back with a second proposal. Am I right? I mean, so we have vetted this with the citizens, and we have been talking about this for quite a while. So I want you to answer, if you don't mind.
Yes, ma'am. We have had two presentations from Richmond on this. One when they came in and proposing 300 units. And if I recall correctly, council was in opposition to that size of the project. We went back to the negotiating table with them. They reduced it down to 200. They came back in and did another presentation. I understand Mr. Stats brings up a good point, but I don't know that we're at a point to have a town hall meeting over something that this council gave me direction to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement. I think that, again, I know that there is some leeriness on Mr. Stats's part to move forward with this. I'm going to ask you to vote on this so that I can execute this contract and we can get this project going. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions from council? Councilman Donahue.
I thoroughly agree with what you have to say. Thank you. Thank you for Mr. Stats for bringing this to us, but I do believe this is one of those things where we have been elected to make the hard choices, And tonight, I move to accept this proposal.
Second.
Madam Mayor, if I can add just one other thing, this will be all aired again. There's a requirement that this developer will bring back to us a site plan with elevations and floor plans and the whole 9 yards. Their contract specifically, and I know that one of the concerns that we have in town, and I share with Mr. Stats, is what product we're going to be getting. We have specifically put in his contract that it is their signature series. I am comfortable. They have committed to building that. I think this council has seen, along with some of the general public and those that wanted to make a trip downtown, what this consists of. I think this is a good project, and I think we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Councilman Shalura.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad we finally see something before us. My question is, I'm a little puzzled that there's such large differences between this contract and the contract that we have with Paragon. And for instance, the deposit is $50,000. Paragon was required to do more than that. Purchase prices are similar. And then they come up with $100,000 later, and Paragon had to come up with a heck of a lot more. Although we're out of contract with Paragon, and that'll be a discussion for a little later. But my concern is, why are we asking for much less skin in the game from one developer and not the other? I'd like to see something a little more consistent, and I'm all for allowing some discretion and having the staff negotiate a contract, but I'm also want to make sure that we are looking out for our best interests in the city and having the developer show that they have a substantial commitment, because $50,000 is not much for a $3 million contract. And then the $100,000 past that, which the Paragon one was at least double that or more, 240, whatever it was. So that's where I have a little heartburn with that, unless there's something I don't know about, and just wanted to bring that to the forefront, and the timelines that are here. I know last time we had on the terms and conditions of the Paragon contract, we had in-depth discussion with those. What is the due diligence period? What is the time to contract, so forth and so on. I don't know that we had much of that discussion with this particular contract once the council had agreed on, okay, we will do the apartments, and I'm okay. Mr. Stats brought up a good point. I'm one to be very transparent, but I mean, we've discussed this. The apartment community made a presentation to the city council, televised. There's no secret. We're not doing something in the back room. But I certainly would expect that some of the terms and conditions we would, I don't want to micromanage it, but certainly I want to know the due diligence period and the deposits, which is very important. I want to make sure that, they're in and they're not just going to turn around and walk away 2 months from now. Because we're tied down, and I certainly want them to be tied down with, in a way that they would feel it, financially. So that's really my biggest hesitation right now with what's in front of me. Thank you.
Are there other comments? And council, I would ask, based on what Councilman Shalura is raising in section 3A and 3B of the purchase and sale agreement, is there any desire to amend the motion?
No.
Councilman Pagorle.
I'd like to hear from city manager.
I'd like to hear from the city manager too. I don't know where we're at with this. Is this a done? Is this, has the other side seen this contract, or is this just we're approving this to deliver to them for their comments? Is this first draft? Where are we with this?
I'm hoping that this is not the first draft. I'm hoping this is the final draft.
Yep.
We've been working on it for a while. Yes, the other side has seen it. In fact, they were ready to sign it even before it was brought to you tonight because they're anxious to get going. But I said that they should wait till you've at least given some approval of this particular contract before they put their name on it.
Thank you.
Good job.
City
Yeah,
Manager
yeah,
Stevenson.
if I can just provide a response to Mr. Chalura's comments. You know, we have worked through this, this contract, and talked with them about the timeline and the deposits and everything else. This is what we have tentatively agreed upon, and that's why this is before council for council's blessing to execute this contract. I do think that the deposits that they're doing are adequate, saying that, in fact, their inspection period is about 60 days, which is fairly quick. I can tell you this, that Richmond has called and has insisted that we get busy with this. They're chomping at the bit. So with a short fuse on being able to get inspection periods done and everything else, I don't know that one contract needs to follow suit with the other one. I think it all kind of plays into the big picture of things. I would love to get $200,000 out of them, but that would probably end up being back and forth conversations that probably won't lead to anything but a compromise. We have, in fact, talked about this in relationship to not necessarily the other contracts, but what Ms. Shoshone and I feel comfortable with as far as approaching Richmond and saying, here's what we can live with. So it's not as if we didn't have conversation. I do think that it is adequate for us to engage them, and I do think that they're very anxious to engage in this project. So,
Thank you, City Manager. Are there any other comments?
I have something else, actually a question for Mr. Chalura, since he is in this business. Not sure I'm actually asking the question properly, but I'm going to ask it the best way I know how. What is the downside to, if we were to move forward with this just the way it is, what do you see as the downside? I guess is the best way to ask the question.
Well, if I was Mr. Moody sitting in the audience right now and I see this, knowing that I'm on a contract, when you come back to me to renegotiate my contract, my deposits are going to be different. You have $3 million at stake, and I would think that you'd be somewhat similar, not, way off from the other one, which it seems like it is. So the downside is you have less skin in the game from the developer side. It's their money. If they're serious about it, and once they go through the due diligence, they put that money in, and it's going to go hard. A lot of times they'll phase it in steps or stages. Furthermore, you're much less going to walk away from $350,000 than you are $100,000. They're both a lot of money, but 3.5 times as much because your purchase price is substantial. What's your carrying cost every month for this property that you're holding it? It's on your dime. So, I look at it from that perspective. We're holding the property for all this time, so this additional time you're holding the property, that's not considered in your price that you're assessing them. The price is what it is. Paragon, we had price set up, great, well, it's out of contract now. And we were talking about this thing in November, and it went on and on and on, but as far as this one goes, it's taken us 2 months to come up with to have a contract. I think sometime in May is when we approved it. So it took 2 months to come up with your contract. And the deposits are substantially different than the other one. So the downside is it's more beneficial to the developer than it is to us, and they have less skin in the game. If you're good with that and you're comfortable, so be it.
But that only comes into play if we have a developer that's not truly interested in finishing the project. Is that correct? If we go forward the way things are here, and this developer wants to actually build 200 units, and we turn to dirt, once we turn dirt, it doesn't really matter, right?
The key word you said is if.
Yeah, right.
That's the key
Understood,
word.
yeah.
The same thing, Paragon came forward, there's no development agreement in place, their contract's expired. I just want a little more teeth, that's all I'm
Understood.
trying to say.
No, understood, but
You know,
it just-
you could make the tough decisions now, or,
I feel like, quite frankly, I feel like, you know, council has been put into a box. That, you know, we are to, you know, we've got a contract that everybody has agreed to but council. Certainly, I think council should have seen this before everybody else said, we're okay with it. And I don't want us be the ones that squash this deal, because we now go back to them and say, we want 200,000 now, or 250,000 now. And your points are all well taken, and you know, you're certainly much more adept at this business than I will ever be. But my concern is that we would squash the deal if we were to say to them, don't like the contract, we need twice as much as deposits on, you know, both those two paragraphs. And, you know, they seem like they're interested, you know, they went through the effort of letting us look at their properties. They obviously, they've been calling you guys, looking to move forward. I understand it, but for me personally, at this point, I think it's worth rolling the dice, and we have another developer sitting in the audience that actually was before the second developer, and I want to see him go forward too. And I would think that, you know, proving this contract tonight might give him some warm fuzzies that, you know, he's going to have some company out there turning dirt. So for me personally, I get your point. I don't disagree with it, but I wish we had seen this earlier rather than tonight, voting on it for the first time tonight when everybody else is apparently on board with it. So I'm going to begrudgingly vote in favor of it, just because I want to see this. You know, we've been down this road so many times, and I understand that there's a lot of apprehension. I have some apprehension myself because we've been to the altar a few times and been left there. But somebody's got to move this thing forward, and I think it should be us.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further discussion? At this point, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you, motion carries. Moving forward, there is no notated outstanding council business. We'll move to new business, appointment of a voting delegate for the 92nd Annual Florida League of Cities Conference. City Manager Stevenson will explain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City management has received a request from the Florida League of Cities for a member of Temple Terrace and a vote as to represent the city at the 92nd Annual Florida League of Cities Conference, and ask for an appointment of a voting member. I'm bringing that to you this evening so that you guys can vote to appoint a member to attend that meeting as a voting member.
Where and when?
It is August 16th to the 18th. It is in Hollywood, Florida. This is not something that is absolutely required. It is a request out of League of Cities, and certainly our involvement with the League of Cities certainly would be beneficial for someone to attend this.
Okay. Okay. But I nominate our mayor to be the voting delegate at the 92nd Annual FLC Conference in Hollywood. Did you say Hollywood?
Yes. Yes.
Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that if you are in agreement.
I'm signed up to attend.
Okay.
That's what
Okay.
Councilman Pagorlik was asking is,
Okay.
are you going? So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I have a comment. For the last 2 years, I've served on the policy committee, which was the land use and economic affairs. And I was invited to attend this, and I explained to them that I am not the League of Cities representative, that's our mayor. And so they have invited you, hopefully you've received the email to attend. Now, the meeting you'll be attending will be the wrap-up of last year's work. Going forward, They did ask me to move to a different policy committee, which is the Transportation and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, which I have agreed to do. Now, these are daytime meetings in Orlando, and because we cannot serve on the same policy committee, that was why that happened. So I have moved off of my former committee onto a new committee, which is fine with me, and those dates are September 14th and October 12th. I will be attending those, however, those are day trips. They do not require any cost to the city. But we may want to think about, when we're putting the new budget together, because in November, there's a 2-day legislative conference, which really would be beneficial for both of us to attend. I do not know if you're planning on attending or not, but I just want to put that out there so that you know that that is coming, and that's in Orlando. If it isn't in the budget, I'm okay with that. I will go to the September and October meetings, which are really the defining meetings where we actually set policy in place to go before the legislators.
Okay, we have a motion second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you. There is one additional piece of new business. Council members, I would call your attention to the manila folders that you received this evening. At a previous council meeting, there was some discussion around the 3 senior level staff people that report directly to council on what are our expectations, how will we hold people accountable, what are we really looking for. I, at that point, volunteered to work on developing position results descriptions that really articulate the key result areas. We worked from their contracts to develop that, and then also tied in the behavioral competencies that have been identified by the city. The documents that you have received this evening will look like an evaluation template for each. But again, if this is the position results description of where we want you focused on a daily basis and how we expect you to behave in your interactions with internal team members and with constituents, it makes sense that we build the evaluation system absolutely in alignment with what the position results description are. So this evening you are receiving for the city manager, for the city attorney, and for the city clerk. You will look and be able to see that for the technical aspects of their job, the actual evaluation will come up to a total of 60 points. For the behavioral competencies that we've adopted as a city, there will be a total of 35 points that can be awarded. And then looking at how we best live out that mission statement, why we exist as a city, and how these 3 senior executive level staff members work in living out the mission, that is a 5-point for a potential of top 100 points. And so the request is, as you review these evaluation forms this year, I know it's a little bit different, and as I queried and asked, they said it regularly changes how we evaluate, so we're trying to kind of pull in the reins and be very seamless in our approach. If you would work through these documents and return them to, since we can't have any direct communications, if you return them to Jeannie Barlow by Wednesday, August 1st, then the scores and the summary evaluations I'll be prepared to present to you at the August 21st council meeting. So these are available. Again, if you have any questions as you're reviewing it, if you feed them to Jeannie, she'll be able to get with me if there are any questions. But there's a front sheet that kind of explains it as well. So that is for council. I'd ask if there's any additional new business. Councilman Shalura.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a couple items I'd like to bring up for discussion. Number one, which was brought to our attention this evening, Mr. Stats came up and addressed the liens. And in the past, the way the city handled these would be that direction to pursue a lien would normally come from the code board, not from the city council. The code board would, authorize, let's go ahead and move for foreclosure or whatever we're going to do. And I really liked his idea, first time I've heard about it, where there's an attorney that's representing other municipalities and jurisdictions at no cost, unless they, of course, collect something. So with all of the workload that we tend to have today, and with a lot of the fines that are just sitting out there, that may be an avenue to pursue. So I would certainly, if Mr. Stevenson has not already done so, is to look at the service of the gentleman that was mentioned by Mr. Stats, and also we need to make sure that the code board is aware that they are the ones that make the determination if they want to move forward with bringing it forward to collect the lien from their perspective. I think Mr. Lorich nodded his head that that's how they've done it. That's how we did it when I was on the code board, and I don't know any other way it's been done. So we don't normally do it as a council. It's done by the code board.
If I may follow up on that, I mean, it's, the way we've done it in the past, I'm not saying, and it was very costly, because the first step that we would direct our attorney to do was to go out and do an asset search to make sure there was something, if we're gonna foreclose on a lien, to see if there was something to get. If we got an attorney that's gonna do all that, and let him do it. I mean, I'm all in favor of it. If he's gonna do it, and we get, you know, whatever, he collects 20%, we collect 80%, whatever that deal ends up being, it's better than what we have now. In fact, you know, we went to and I was told to stop because it was getting expensive. I mean, I actually had people subpoenaed to come back in front of us before we did the asset search. So if he's gonna do all that, I can tell you that, yeah, it's more than worth it. It's a great idea, and I too didn't know that I knew there was collection attorneys out there, but I didn't know that there was guys that actually went after liens, and I think it's a great idea. I'm all in favor of it.
Well, and knowing that none of us individually direct staff, that we do it as a body, if acceptable, would absolutely entertain a motion that we direct City Manager Stevenson and City Attorney Shishon to connect with Matthew Weidner to specifically address collection of liens. Is there a motion?
I think we have to modify, I'll make the motion, but I'd like to modify it to include the code board.
Yep.
So that they would, know that they're the ones that have to say, go do it. And that maybe, either Mr. Stats or the attorney himself can come in front of the code board and explain that process to them, so that they can then make that decision as to whether or not to go forward with that.
Okay, so there is a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I'm concerned that we're jumping so quickly to this one attorney, just because that's the only name we've been given. I have no problem with us directing a city manager and a city attorney to work with the code board and to see if this is something that's good for us, but we've really put a lot into this prematurely. I mean, this is the first time any of us have heard it. I mean, he may end up being the great, wonderful collector that he is, I don't know, but with this, I just hate having that name included in the request to move forward, to look into. I thought this was just more of a research rather than
Thank you, Councilman
If I may.
Chilera.
Go ahead, Frank.
My point was gonna be, he could look at this attorney or any other ones that have done something similar and bring us back, say, this is where we go from here. But first of all, and I think the point that was made is that it's brought to the code board first. Are you guys good with this? Yes, then move forward, do your research, and, we move on from that point there.
Very good, Councilman
Well,
Pogorelec.
the other reason that I maybe prematurely jumped all over it is the fact that if he's already doing it for City of Tampa and some other municipalities, we can piggyback on his particular contract rather than having to go out and get some stranger so I think he's a good place to start. And, certainly if they want to talk to other people, the motion doesn't limit them from doing that, so.
Very
Then
good.
I need the motion read again, because I read a lot into it. I heard a lot more than I thought it was going to include.
Thank you. Councilman Pogorelec, would you like to state the motion?
Yes, I will make a motion that the city manager move forward with this particular process and include a discussion with the city code board as to the discussion held here tonight, and talk to that particular attorney as to, what he would do, and if then they can go out and find somebody else if they want to, I didn't say that the last time, but just so I clear things up for you. But, you know, again, that's the motion, but I want to add to that my particular opinion that I think it's a great idea. And like I said, if this guy's already doing it for somebody else, I'm not so sure, and, you know, it's up to the co-board, but I don't think you need to look much further.
And again, I believe what Mr. Stats shared is he is under contract with both Hillsborough County as a county entity and the city of St. Petersburg. So
Right.
We have had a motion, we have had a second, we have had discussion. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay sign. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Stats, for bringing this to our attention. Is there any other new business to come before council?
Yes, my other order of business, and I thought we discussed this, but I sent an email back and it came back, so I just want to make sure I wasn't just losing my mind. At the last preliminary budget meeting, we had discussion. There were supposed to be 2 meetings before the setting the millage rate. And I recall Mr. Ross was uncomfortable with that and wanted, you know, maybe a little more time to digest, and I alluded to that as well, and at least 3 before the next setting the millage rate. And we all have gotten an email saying we're going to have a budget workshop on the 27th and one on the 1st, and then we're going to move into a meeting and adopt the tentative millage rate. And I had responded and said, well, are we having another one? So yes, we're having 2, one on the 27th, one on the 1st. But I think I was asking to have 3 because it's a very tight window. We have seen no numbers. Normally we would see numbers in June or earlier, and I am not comfortable with meeting on the 27th and then on the 1st, setting a millage or tentative millage rate. And yes, it could change, but to change it is an uphill battle once you set it. So that was my question. I just want to make sure I wasn't the only one that heard that, because I thought I said, yeah, we're having as many meetings as you guys want. But the response we got back was we are having 2. It's the 27th and the 1st, and I'd like to have at least 3, since we haven't seen anything to date. That's just me speaking. It's a lot of information, and, you know, this is not the only thing I do, although I do dedicate a lot of time to it. And our budget is very serious business. So I don't know the feelings of the others. I would make myself available one of those days in between, but I'm just not overly comfortable with just having 2 before the tentative millage rate. That's just my comments. Just wanted to share them, see what the thoughts of the rest of the bodies were.
Thank you, Councilman Chilera. Councilman Pogorelic.
Well, I certainly am in that camp, especially when, you know, like you said, we haven't seen even a tentative budget yet. And I alluded to it the last meeting, I'll say it straight out this meeting. It's my hope that because we're probably going to have $1.4 million in additional revenue, that we think about giving some of that back to the citizens of Temple Terrace, and that we're not just going to set a tentative millage rate that's the same as the current tentative millage rate. I'm hoping that we get some reduction in the millage rate. Charles, you weren't city manager back then, but I think Bob might have been on the council at that time. But we have always said, and Mayor Fronte said it, and, you know, this part of this council said it way back when, that when revenues start coming in that are more than what we've got now, that we would be giving money back to the citizens in the form of lower millage rates. We have an opportunity to do that this year. I think we should seize that opportunity and keep our promise to the citizens, and not just, okay, we got another $1.4 million, let's spend it. Let's be thoughtful about it, and let's see if there is a way to give some of the millage back to the citizens. That's their burden. Most of the tax money in this city comes from the residents of this city. We don't have a big commercial outlay of taxes. It's mostly residential. And if we have an opportunity to lower the millage rate, we should seize that opportunity. And this whole idea that, okay, we just set a tentative millage rate, we can lower it if we want to, that's just as high as we can go. We all know that historically, changing that tentative millage rate is an uphill battle. So again, I think obviously we're gonna have some disagreement on what I just said, and I think the only way to hash that out is to truly set at least 3 meetings, especially at this late stage, since none of us have seen even a tentative budget yet.
We have heard from 2 council members their desire for additional meetings, to have a meeting between the 27th and the 1st. The 30th would be an option. I believe Councilman Ross is back on the 23rd and 24th. He shared he'd be
I
available.
think he's back this weekend, whatever date that is.
So that would also open up the 23rd or the 24th. I was going to be out of town, but I like Mr. Chiller, I do have other business outside of this, but I've arranged a flight that will get me to where I need to be and get me back, so I could be available the 23rd, the 24th, or the 30th.
I am not available the 23rd. The question would be, she was thinking she had until the 27th, Ms. Boswell. Can she get us this before the 27th? And I know that we also asked, are we going to actually see it for the first time at that meeting, or are you going to deliver it to our?
If I can chime in, I'm not quite sure how you know that she's going to have it ready by the 27th, but besides that, part of my city manager's report, and I will chime in here, was to ask for these 2 dates to be set, and also a special meeting on the 1st to adopt the tentative millage. The tentative millage, we have found out, is due no later than August 3rd down to the property appraisers. That gives me a couple days in order to get things together so that I can get it down there to them. We can extend that August 1st meeting. We can have another meeting. I am open for suggestions. The plan is to get you a preliminary budget, which has typically been done. We can't give you a preliminary budget unless we know what our revenues are coming in from ad valorem, and we don't get that until the 1st of July. So this notion that we've gotten a budget before July 1st is not true. We have given you budget overviews and workshops. I've got the schedule from the last 2 previous years, and we've given you introductions in July. We've had a regular council meeting to set up a tentative agenda based on our preliminary estimates, and that's all they are, but we really can't give you estimates and preliminary stuff until we know what ad valorem and property values are going to be. That being said, this is a very tight schedule. I don't know that it's any different this year than it is any other year. I am open for a 3rd meeting. You will get your budgets, your preliminary budgets on Friday. I can tell you this, they are in fairly good shape, and we're prepared on the 27th. That gives us about 10 days, 7 days, to kind of review this thing. I think you're going to find, you're pleasantly surprised that it's in a lot better shape than it was last year, and I know that's a concern. The tentative millage rate, again, is one of those exercises that we have to go through, and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Perkolich. But again, it is just to set a stone in place to say we can't go any higher than that. And we certainly have always overemphasized giving a little bit of breathing room rather than dropping it down to something that we have to work towards, and then in August have to start cutting back on services in order to meet that millage rate and that revenue expense budget balance. So I'm open for a 3rd meeting if we can come to some agreement. We're more than prepared to do that. I had discussions with staff this morning to prepare themselves to address their individual budgets on the 27th. I do think it's in fairly good shape. There are some stuff that we had discussed at our last introduction that we still need to incorporate into our budget, but we will try to do that at that 1st meeting so that we can move forward with the 2nd meeting, at which time we can prepare all these changes and all these manipulation of numbers and revenues and expenses so that we can come into August 1st with a good idea of where we need to be. Okay, taking into account, we'd love to cut taxes, but you know that the exercise that we have to go through in order to do that, that's painful for everybody, so.
So, council, it appears the 2 possible dates would be the 30th or the 24th. There was a question if staff would be ready on as early as the 24th to have a meeting, again, to allow the dialogue and any adjustments as necessary. Are there any other suggested dates from council members? It appears those are the two dates that would be. So I'm now looking to staff. Is there a possibility, is it realistic that the 24th would be,
Well, if I can make a recommendation, if we can push back the special meeting on the 1st, maybe to the 2nd, that still gives me a day to get this prepared. I will look at our finance director and make sure that she understands that we're trying to do that, and hold a meeting on the 30th and the 1st instead of the 24th. My concern with that is again, it's always been the plan to get this to you by the end of business day on Friday, so that you have at least a weekend and a whole week to look at this budget. If you do it on the 24th, we're going to start talking about stuff that you've seen for 2 days, 3 days. But whatever the pleasure of the council is, we're prepared to make whatever adjustments we need to.
Don't you have a hard date of August 3rd, though?
We have a hard date of
Yeah.
August 3rd.
So August 1st, we better stick to.
And I'm saying if we can do a tentative millage rate, a special meeting on the 2nd, that doesn't take but a little bit of time to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to do. That is pretty much, I think, our drop dead date with trying to set a tentative millage date so that we have at least the day to get the paperwork prepared and down to property appraiser.
so the dates we are looking at are the 27th, the 30th, the 1st, and the 2nd?
The 2nd would be just a special meeting. Or we can do it on the 2nd in the morning, if everybody's available, and we can have that tentative millage date set on the 2nd, just after the 3rd meeting. Or
Yes.
have a special meeting after the 3rd meeting.
My suggestion is you hold that day as a floating day if you need an extra meeting, possibly. Set the 3, and if you have that flexibility that morning, then so be it. Maybe that might be a way to go instead of keep
Very
it.
So
sort of-
if there's agreement, then the 27th, the 30th, the 1st, and the 2nd as a float date as necessary.
Sounds good to me.
What are the times?
I think the time,
It- Lynn, if I could get a nod from my finance director, does that work?
The 30th in the afternoon, yes, not in the morning.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Well, late afternoon works, 30th late afternoon works for me, if we want to do it at 5
That's
or
fine.
6. Yeah.
That's fine. Later, the better,
27th,
on the 30th.
30th.
so the 30th at 5 o'clock. The 27th was 3 o'clock, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the 1st was,
It was set for 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock? And then the 2nd will, again,
Just float.
determine, we'll allow that to float.
Would you send out an email with all those new times and dates?
Well, you've
on it?
actually added a 3rd date, so you may not need one on the 2nd.
Yeah, that's why.
That's right, that's
Yeah.
why it's a
That's the
floater.
plan.
Yeah.
If we need the discussion, it'll
Yeah.
be added. Very good.
It-
Thank you
it-
for bringing that up, Councilman
Okay,
Chairman.
let me clarify something. In order to set the tentative millage rate, we have to call a special meeting of council. So I
Right.
really need that to happen on the 2nd, no later than the 2nd.
And we might be able to do it on the 1st.
I know, but I gotta advertise for it. It's not one of those things.
Oh.
We have to give time certain on that meeting.
So what was the time of the 27th, what we'd say?
27th is 3
27th is
o'clock?
3 PM.
3 o'clock, 3 PM, done. Okay.
And you'll send an
So that
email
was
out with all this
27.
info on it, right?
And then the
30th is
30th?
5 o'clock?
30th. Okay, 5.
And the 1st is 3 o'clock.
And the 1st is 3 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
Can we have some feedback from council on doing the special meeting? You want to do that after the 1st meeting, or would you
Yes.
rather move it until
Yeah.
the 2nd?
And that's
Per-
already been, hasn't already been put out to the community?
Well, I don't see any, I mean, that should be the special meeting should be a very short
Well,
meeting.
it hasn't,
Yeah.
no,
But it has to be a
that's-
convened
yeah,
meeting.
That's why we-
That's why I'm
Let's do it
concerned
the
you know
first.
about it, because it really hasn't. All this comes up in discussion with you guys I
Okay.
can't put it out to the public until you guys tell me what you want to do, so.
Well,
Okay.
my point
Well,
is,
yeah.
if we have a meeting on the 1st at 3 o'clock, and we have a 6 o'clock meeting, special meeting to establish the millage rate, I think that's probably doable.
Yeah.
Yep, because we've had 3 meetings
We've
at
had
that
3
point.
meetings.
Yep.
We've-
Yeah.
We've
So
added that
6 o'clock
extra
on the
meeting.
1st.
What time was the first?
The first starts at 3 o'clock for our
3,
final meeting, but
And the
then
public
the
meeting is at 6.
special notice meeting to the public
Yeah.
will commence at 6.
And if that first date will work for everybody, what I suggest we do is we advertise this for immediately following the workshop so that we can kind of leave that time open.
Okay.
If we finish at 5 o'clock, we can hold the meeting at 5 o'clock rather than sit around
That's
for
fine.
6 o'clock,
Okay.
Very
if
good,
that's acceptable.
very good.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other new business to come before?
Do we need a motion before that to make it official?
Move to approve.
We have a motion, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The meeting schedule is set. We have one more new item of business. Councilman Shalura.
The last item is, I would just ask if this council is in support of it, that I would like to have much better communication on the redevelopment. At each council meeting, at a minimum, I want a report, an update report. And don't, especially on this redevelopment should be the most important thing that is before us. I know a lot of you feel that way. For instance, I will give you an example, is the contract that we approved tonight. We didn't say anything boo about it for 2 months, and then tonight we said, here's the contract. Along the way, we need updates. Along the way, we need to be told that the deposit's gonna be this, or it's gonna be that, or these are the sticking points. And if in fact, some of the information, because sometimes there's negotiations that go on, nothing prohibits the city manager to call each one of us individually and keep us updated, so you don't show all your cards publicly. The other one is, one of my biggest disappointments is that I need our city attorney to keep us apprised of legal matters. And by that, I mean the contract with Paragon should have never expired, never expired. That shouldn't have happened. That's your responsibility to inform us it's expiring. Now, if the developer does not want to renew it, then you come tell us about it. But I do not want to find out about that situation under a question and answer session as we did at the last council meeting or 2 council meetings back. I mean, that's pretty significant. I don't even know what to say. I was extremely disappointed with that. That's not the way business should be conducted, certainly not what I expect. And I need updates, and we need to make sure that when everybody makes mistakes, nobody's perfect, but when severe mistakes like that are made, people need to be held accountable, and because we're held accountable. So I would ask this council, and if we need to do it in a form of motion, however you want to do it, I'm not here to create more work, but we need to know about important matters and updates, and I would like us to have an update on redevelopment, not just one developer or the other, on redevelopment at every council meeting to keep us updated on what is going on. So
Second.
that's my motion. I just want to know. I need the transparency. I need to be connected, that's all. And I hope I'm speaking for the rest of you as well.
And I heard a second. And absolutely, at our strategic retreat, the 3 items that were loud and clear and unanimously approved by this council, and really the marching orders for our entire city staff, were redevelopment, economic development, and annexation. So I think it is very fair, Councilman Shalura, that we ask for both City Attorney Shoshone and City Manager Stevenson that at every meeting there will be an update report. And if there is something of a sensitive nature, that we, council members, can be made abreast of it either the Friday prior to council or even as late as the Monday. But giving time for a good response rather than putting any of us in a reactionary mode. So there is a motion, there is a second. Is there any further discussion around that? All in favor, please signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the nay sign. Thank you very much. Any other new business to come before council? We'll now turn it over to City Manager Stevenson for your city manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple items here. Everyone is aware that our fireworks display got canceled partially because of weather and partially because of the performance of the company that was supposed to put this thing on. That's most unfortunate. We do have we have had some discussion with the company in an attempt to try not only lose the excitement of fireworks in Temple Terrace, but also to subject ourselves to losing a lot of money because of a contract situation. Mr. Langfeld has been in contact with a principal there with the Pyro Engineering, I believe is the name of the company. If he would come up, he can kind of explain to you what last correspondence we've had from them. I think that it is something that is suitable, that we just want council to give our blessing before we move forward. So, Carl, I'll let you kind of summarize your conversations with Mr. Sig.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. Beginning on the morning of the 5th of July, I was in contact with officials from the fireworks vendor that we use. This fireworks vendor, we have been a customer of theirs since 2004. They have been a great provider of our annual fireworks for all of those years. And I feel that we have been a valued customer of theirs, and that became very apparent in my conversations with them starting on the morning of the 5th. There were significant difficulties that we ran into during the day with the crew that was sent out there to do the shoot, which were magnified by the weather that we ran into that afternoon. Ultimately, that culminated with us having to make the unfortunate decision to cancel the fireworks that night because there was no way that we were going to be prepared to shoot off fireworks at a reasonable hour that night, given the state of the setup when they had to stop due to the weather. That was an extremely unfortunate situation, and one that, honestly, July 3rd for the past 14 years, I have not slept. It is something that has been in the back of my mind, that what if this happens? And after 14 years, it finally did. And it made me sick that night that we did not have fireworks. The fireworks vendor was very receptive to the criticism that came their way. I had pictures, I had timelines, I had all sorts of backup to my claims regarding what happened that day with their crew. City manager and I had some discussions about how we can move forward from here. We had a conference call with management from the fireworks company. What we are proposing to do is to hold a fireworks show on Saturday, September the 1st, which is the Saturday of Memorial Day, or excuse me, Labor Day weekend, at the same location. The fireworks vendor will provide the same show that we would have had on the 4th of July with some enhancements to it. In addition, they are going to be providing us some financial compensation in an amount of $4,400, I believe was the number off the top of my head. I don't have the paperwork in front of me, to compensate us for our staff time that we're going to have to be putting forward to redo the show on the night of September 1st. I have had some informal discussions with the country club as well as with Woodmont Clubhouse, just to ensure that there are no conflicts with having the event on that night. No conflicts have been brought up. So I see it at this point as a green light to move forward with setting up for a fireworks show on September the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Langfeld. Any comments or questions from council? Councilman Shalera.
Thank you for that update, Mr. Langford. My question is, are we going to continue to use this contractor? Is that sort of what you're thinking or not, or?
Like I said, we have a 14-year relationship with this company, and they certainly recognize the error of their ways. They're going, I believe, as they need to right the wrong. We go out each October to fireworks vendors for proposals in order to hold our fireworks show on the 4th of July. They are by far the provider that gives us the best bang for our buck each year. They have demonstrated that by what they are telling us that they are going to provide for us on the 4th of July. We will do that again. I would like to try and continue our relationship with this company. I think they're making a great effort to right this. The principal from the company that I have been talking to says he will actually be here on Labor Day. He wants to be here to show their commitment to continuing the relationship with the city. But again, we will go out in October for proposals from fireworks vendors.
I guess the reason I'm asking is I've been involved here a long time, and I don't, obviously you know that part of the business probably better than anybody, being where you are. And I was told by a bunch of folks, police officers and others that are long gone now, that this is crazy. Why didn't you have fireworks? So the lightning was a problem. Years ago they used to set everything up in the morning. And then in the evening, if it starts lightning in the middle of the day, you take a break and you come back and you're ready to rock and roll. So I don't know if these guys are overbooked. Did they spread themselves too thin?
Well,
I don't know that.
That was much of the problem that we ran into with this crew, where, I don't know if you happened to notice, while we were staging, pulling the dignitaries out of the parking lot, a big Ryder truck showed up in our parking lot.
Yeah, I didn't.
That was the fireworks truck.
Okay.
They showed up here. They were here at 9:40. Somehow they didn't make it over to 56th Street until 10:45. Where they went for an hour, we don't know. And then they got the truck stuck because they didn't go in the right entrance. We couldn't pull it out with the equipment we had on site. We had to go get a front end loader to pull their truck out of the sand that they got it stuck in order for them to get it out to the ball fields.
Right.
So it was,
Okay,
yeah.
You're on it, I get it, but, a few people, I didn't know the internal parts of it, but a few people reached out and said, this is ridiculous. We've never, we've been around fireworks a long time. We've had hard rain, and obviously we don't want anybody to get hurt. But the suggestion they made is we used to do this thing early in the morning. We sit there and, as patrol officers, watch it. And why is this not happening now? Because, you saw the sunset. I mean, it did lightning, I give you, but the evening it was nice, and folks were, they were a little wound up. But
No, and I understand, and each year when we have this, we get a crew that is sent out by
I get it.
the fireworks vendor, and there's a crew leader and the guys that they have working. We've had some fantastic ones in the past.
Absolutely.
We've had some trouble ones in the past, and this one just,
The worst.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you. I appreciate the feedback, and that's helpful to know that it was a couple of knuckleheads that basically were not responsible, that messed everything up, so got it.
Thank you, Mr. Langfeld. Councilman Donahue, and then we'll go to Councilman
Thank you.
Gorelick.
So what is the thinking of having this done September 1st rather than next year?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Then next 4th of July, just moving it. I
Well,
mean, it's-
to
Just
have a fireworks celebration this year, to
Councilman Gorelick.
That was my question. I mean, it seems to me, I can pretty much guarantee you're not going to have the number of people there on Labor Day to watch fireworks that you would have on July 4th, and it just seems to me, I mean, if you've already cut the deal, obviously, but it seems to me that all you're doing is opening up the floodgates for additional criticism, and, oh, you're going to have them on Labor Day, you should have had them on 4th of July. But, and, that way you could have just saved some money out of next year's budget and just have them do it, whatever money that we paid them this year, have them do it next 4th of July. And, let sleeping bottle rockets lie.
And I believe there were financial and contractual considerations. I know Mr. Stevenson is anxious to reply. Mr. Stevenson.
It is our, let me answer that series of questions in just one statement. We've got a horrible contract with this company. We have very little repercussions on them, and they've got all of them on us. This is a contract that's been in existence for 14 years, and just like a bunch of other stuff that I have had to deal with in my tenure as your city manager, a problem that has been discovered in that we have no repercussions to have this on July 4th. As a matter of fact, the contract is rather clear that if we don't schedule something in 3 months because of a cancellation like this and hold fireworks within 6 months, that we're out $18,000. That's why we're trying to do something, okay? To answer your question, will we do business with this company again? That's up to them, because this contract stinks. I don't understand, even down to the point that if we have a problem, this contract says we go into arbitration and we've got to do it in New York City. I am not kidding. That's the extent of this contract. So, I'm real disappointed that we couldn't have fireworks. I mean, I myself was geared up to come into town. I looked at the radar about the time that we canceled fireworks, specifically to see where there were storms. There were storms 5 miles south of us in Brandon. The call was made in order to protect the safety of everybody out there, including the people loading fireworks, our staff, and the general public. And I'm apologetic to the standpoint that we didn't have the fireworks, but there was a lot of unfortunate events that came together that caused this problem. We're trying to salvage that $18,000. I think this is a good solution to it. They're offering up $4,400 for some of our staff time. Again, if you don't want to hold it on September 1st, I'm okay with that. I'm sure they will be okay with it. I'm just trying to find a solution for this community.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Thank you, Mr. Langfeld. City Manager Stevenson, does that conclude your city manager's report?
No, ma'am, I've got a couple other things if I can. I guess just to clarify things here, are we set for the first? Would you like us to continue with that
Yes.
approach? Okay. We will make arrangements. We will get it out there. We'll have people engaged, I'm sure.
Okay.
So, a couple other things. A couple of meetings ago, the city manager was charged with meeting with the Code Enforcement Board. We had that meeting on the 11th. Madam Mayor and myself had the opportunity to meet with the Code Board and deliver to them some material. There's a book in front of each of you. It is an orientation book. We've been hearing consistently that they wanted more training and more orientation. With the help of the clerk's office and my staff and public code enforcement staff, we were able to put this book together. It is a sampling of what we've handed to them. In our meeting, we had a very productive meeting. I think that everybody was very supportive of getting together and talking and trying to work out some of these differences of opinion. We have asked them to go through this book, read some of this information, provide us some feedback on what else they would like to know, for them to familiarize themselves with the rules of procedure, if there are recommendations on changes or some modifications that they want to any of these documents other than Florida statute, obviously, that we can't do, that we would be willing to help them do that. That being said, I think the main focus of the meeting was to get everyone to understand that we need to quit dwelling on the past and move forward with some of these decisions so that we're working at the benefit of code enforcement, the board, this council, and get this thing on the right track. So with that being said, we did have a productive meeting, and I think everybody was very supportive. We had some good conversation. There were tapes done. I don't know if there was minutes going to be constructed, but there were certainly minutes taken, or tape minutes taken, so that if anyone's needs to be privy to that information, they certainly have the availability to get to that information. We asked them to, again, review this information and get back to us. To date, I haven't heard anything, but it's only been a week. But we will continue to work towards getting these board members a little bit more acclimated to what they're supposed to be doing, and we'll do whatever we can in order to get this thing back on track. They have expressed opinions about the in-house attorney, not the in-house attorney, the legal counsel for the board, as well as some of the presentations on lien reductions. Staff heard that, and we're making adjustments to accommodate the board's wishes. I don't know that it has any bearing on staff or this council, but it's certainly the wishes of the board. We're going to try to accommodate them. That being said, unless anybody's got any questions about what we did, we'll kind of continue to give you feedback on stuff that we get back from the board and stuff that we intend to do with the board. So, last but not least, Mr. Chilero's asked for a more regular update on redevelopment. I don't disagree with you on that, and we will make accommodations to do that. I think we're at a point that, as things start progressing here, that that's probably more than appropriate. Okay. I apologize for not getting you the contract before, but I really thought that the venue was you gave me permission to negotiate a contract and then bring it back to you rather than have council negotiate the contract. And that's my misdirection. If I didn't mean to mislead anybody. I do think it's a good contract, and I do think that everybody is sincere in moving these projects forward. We were able to have a meeting with Mr. Moon yesterday, and which was very productive. We continue to battle issues that the title company continues to bring up. I know that Ms. Shoshone and Mr. Moon's attorney have had some direct communication, and we really are truly, honestly trying to work out all these issues. There are some ridiculous requests from this title company. I don't know that we have a good answer for them other than telling you that most of them, not most of them, there are several of them that we're still in negotiations or conversation with, that refer back to Mr. Vlass and Mr. Vlass's leases, so on and so forth. All this stuff is showing up on this title. We are trying to get to the bottom of it. Our conversation with Jared, Mr. Boone, yesterday was that we are all on the same page to get this resolved and get this thing moving as quickly as we can. Mr. Moon has offered to come in this evening. If you've got some questions for him, I do believe that he is just as anxious to get started as we are. So I'll invite him up to the podium if you've got some questions for him. Other than what I've told you, we are desperately working to get this thing straightened out. But
Yeah,
we're dealing with some title issues that I don't know that anybody ever thought would happen, believe me.
Yeah, we just don't have clarity on it, and I just want to clarify that some of these title issues affect not just the portion of property that I'm attempting to purchase, but the entire redevelopment parcel. So the Richmond Group is going to have the same issues that we have. We've taken a number of steps, and some of the title issues have already been cleaned up. There's still a couple outstanding things that, as of tonight, we just don't have clarity on. But to date, there were some documents that do have Vlass's name on it. We're trying to get resolution that we can kind of go forward without having to go back to him, because I don't think that that's going to be a starter for anybody.
No, let's not do that.
Yeah, so I think in good faith, we're all, even though, yes, I am out of contract, we're still proceeding that I am in such, and my attorneys and my direction are continuing to work through these things in hopes that they get to resolution in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. We're delighted to have you with us this evening. Comments, questions? Councilman
Yes,
Chilura.
thank you. And Mr. Moon, thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. Certainly, I totally understand that the title insurance issues are a lot of times spoken to in the contract, and they're subject to obligations to move any further. What I'm just trying to figure out, that I'm just not getting there right now, is if we're out of contract, why don't we go ahead and get back in the contract?
Well, we actually presented an amendment before we went out of contract to extend it, and that amendment was more specifically geared towards the right-of-way issue. At that time, you obviously couldn't convey what I had gone under contract for. We needed to make sure we had resolution on that. And I believe that we didn't continue to go forward as that amendment and what I was then under contract for obligated the city to do something, which was convey property that at the time you did not have the right to convey without having these hearings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that for those issues, the city couldn't enter into an agreement to obligate you all to do something that at the time was physically not possible.
I get it, but you've done this, you're a big boy and I'm a big boy, we know how this works, but we couldn't execute the contract and make it subject to the outstanding conditions, therefore, that's put to rest. That's all, and if that could be a way to work that out.
I was never opposed to executing an amendment to lengthen the process or to have some things go forward. We just never received comments to the amendment and was put on hold.
And you heard my comments, so I'm not too excited about the way it's been handled, but hopefully that's water under the bridge.
Our intent is to, I believe, go back under contract, reinstate, now that the right-of-way has been cleared up.
Yeah.
There still are some outstanding title issues, but we actually submitted a memo today that shows some of the things that were cleared up, and then we're waiting, should have clarity by this week, early next week on some of the other things.
Okay, and I appreciate your honest approach. I would just ask that you please do your best, and I know you have, to try to execute a contract and make it subject to the city plating. I get it, I do the same thing. So I don't want you to commit to something that the city can't commit to convey. So we can make it subject to that. And also, I'm not getting a straight answer from, when I have asked on the development agreement, what's the sticking points, or are there sticking points? And so the contract the contract out of term, which if we can re-engage that with the list what the objections are, and then the development agreement, because I've asked that question a couple times.
And I'll address the development agreement comment. We've gone back and forth with the city a couple of times on, do we actually need a development agreement? And various times it's been no, it's been yes, it's been maybe, but really we want a schedule site plan, and those are the two sticking points that is kind of really being asked of me in the development agreement, and both of those are accounted for in the purchase and sale agreement, in my opinion. So I didn't have a whole lot of clarity what else needed to be involved or in that actual development agreement. We did get a couple of bullet points from city manager that we took that and added some additional language to that, again, was delayed, but it was delivered this afternoon. I know it hasn't been circulated because I think it was 4:30, 4:45 that it actually went out, but it took their format, added a couple indemnification things, the attorney spruced it up a little bit. But from a schedule standpoint, it holds firm to the schedule that I had in the purchase sale agreement. There was a time frame by executing the purchase sale agreement. I figured you all were good with that time frame. And it certainly held my feet to the fire on some other milestones as well.
Well, we're anxious and excited to get to work with you. We want to see this happen. We don't want to work with anybody else. But if I'm just going to ask you and our city team, city manager and city attorney, do all you can do by the next council meeting, if we can be back in contract with the objections or exceptions of what's pending, and the same thing with the development agreement. Because I've asked a question, I'm not getting a clear answer. We're close. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
The clear answer is every development agreement is different, and with the multiple departments that you have, it's hard to get a clear answer on what the actual development agreement needs to entail. Having received the kind of outline from Mr. Stevenson, we have addressed that and kicked it back. So
Okay.
I think we have a good step forward. I'm assuming, anticipating that they'll probably have some comments to it, but I think we have a baseline to work with at this point.
We're moving in the right direction.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you,
Correct.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moon. Does that conclude your city manager's report, sir?
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. That is all I've got, Madam Mayor.
Is there any further business to come be, yes, ma'am?
Can I get this electronically?
Yes.
Can you send this to us electronically, rather than, this is the evaluation?
Yes.
I hate to, I don't want to write.
We'll make it happen. I don't know
pen
that
and
I've got an
pencil.
electronic
Yeah.
copy, but
Yeah.
we'll get it for you.
And it'll come from Jeannie.
It'll come from
It will-
Jeannie,
it
so
will
I
come from
realize it
Jeannie.
won't come for
Yeah.
another 2 days or
Yeah,
so.
yeah, and I will share with, many of our citizens know our executive assistant, Jeannie Barlow, who does just an exemplary job for the city. If you would keep the Barlow family in your thoughts and prayers, Jeannie has lost her father-in-law, so is out for the next couple of days, but just please keep them in your thoughts. And if there's no further business to come before this council, meeting is adjourned.